Hi, my name's Joe. I'm an Irish whiskey ambassador for a company called Dillon Bass, and today I'm going to be your host for your virtual Redbreast whiskey tasting. As a brand ambassador, it's my job to be a representative of the whiskies from Midleton Distillery. Midleton is the biggest distillery in Ireland, and it's home to some of the biggest and best known brands, including Jameson, Powers, Spots, Method Madness, and of course Redbreast. I'm really excited to have with me today the full lineup of all the permanent expressions in the Redbreast family, including the 12-year-old, all the way right up to the brand new 27-year-old. Normally, I would be doing tastings in front of a live audience where things are just a little bit more tactile. Of course, there are some advantages to doing a virtual tasting. First of all, you can just pause at any point. So if at any point you feel like you need a little bit more time with each of the whiskies, or if you just need a break, if you're just sick of listening to me talk, you can just hit the pause button and take a wee break. For this tasting, we're going to be going through each whiskey one by one. So if you can, I would advise you just to hold off on tasting it until we get to that individual whiskey. You'll enjoy it all the more if we can kind of experience it together and you know a little bit of the background and the history behind the whiskey. Redbreast actually began its life as a bonded whiskey, and this is how whiskey would have been traded right up until the 1960s. So it was very unusual for distilleries to actually bottle their own liquid. What they would generally do is they would sell it by the barrel in bulk to bonders or publicans who would then bottle it or even sell it under their own brand. One of the companies that did this was W&A Gilbey. Gilbeys were a bonder who were first of all best known for their wines, but gradually ventured into the spirits bonding business. Gilbeys would buy in unaged liquid from different distilleries, one of which being Jameson Distillery on Bow Street. By 1874, they had over 300,000 gallons of Irish whiskey in bond. The first mention of Redbreast came along in 1912 when a new managing director took over Gilbey's. The new managing director was a bird watcher, and what he did was rename some of the whiskies after his favourite birds. So there would have been Skylark, Chaffinch, Yellowhammer, and of course Redbreast. Over the next few years, unfortunately, most of these brands disappeared, except for Redbreast, which survived and is still one of the most loved Irish whiskies. By the 1970s, Irish distillers had made the decision to phase out selling bulk whiskey in bond, but Gilbey's had managed to persuade Irish distillers to continue to supply liquid for their Redbreast brand. In 1986, Irish distillers purchased the rights to the Redbreast brand and re-released it in 1991 under its current incarnation after a greatly benefited wood programme, and since then, it's become one of the most loved Irish whiskies. Redbreast is a single pot still Irish whiskey. Single pot still is a style of whiskey that's only produced in Ireland, and many regard it as the quintessential style of Irish whiskey. What makes it unique is we actually combine malted and unmalted barley in our mash bill. This combination of malted and unmalted barley is what gives single pot still Irish whiskey its rich, creamy character and distinctive spicy flavour. And in our case, it's triple distilled in traditional copper pot stills. There are two main types of barrels for maturing Redbreast. The first is an American ex-bourbon barrel, and the second is a Spanish Oloroso sherry cask. Only in the most recent expression, the 27-year-old, do we see the inclusion of Portuguese port pipes. The first whiskey we're going to be tasting is Redbreast 12-year-old. This is considered the core expression in the Redbreast family. It's the best-selling single pot still in the world and one of the most awarded, and actually recently just won the World Whiskey Trophy at the International Wine and Spirits Competition in San Francisco. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to nose the whiskey. Nosing is just a fancy word for smelling it. So we're going to sit it under our nose, leaving your mouth open and just breathe in. And what you're trying to do is just identify some of the aromas. So the first thing that comes across here is the distinctive dried fruit character that Redbreast is known for. Plenty of sultanas, dates, raisins. The Spanish oak definitely is at the forefront, and a lot of people really love the sherried character of this whiskey. But actually I find it's a combination of sherry and bourbon, which really gives this whiskey such a beautiful nose. A little bit dusty, it's not by no means a young whiskey, so you're getting a little bit of that kind of mature quality coming across as well. But a really beautiful nose. Next what we're going to do is we're going to taste it. Very rich, very creamy. Again, that's the malted, non-malted barley. We're going to give it that distinctive mouth coating quality. Plenty of that lovely dried fruit character coming through. I always get a little bit of orange peel, almost like a chocolate orange, like Jaffa cake in there as well. Beautifully complex, and really just a fantastic introduction, not only to Irish whiskey, but to single pot still whiskey. So if somebody said to me, I want to try Irish whiskey, I usually drink Scotch, I usually drink American, I would always recommend Redbreast 12-year-old as a place to start. I think it's just a fantastic representation of what single pot still whiskey can be. Next up, we have Redbreast Lestau. This whiskey actually began as a partnership between ourselves at Midleton and a wine producer in Jerez called Bodegas Lestau. And Lustai would be considered to be one of the best sherry producers. We approached them with the idea of using some of their wine barrels to mature our whiskey. So we took some 9 to 11-year-old Redbreast from American ex-bourbon barrels and Spanish Oloroso sherry casks, and we finished it for an additional year in first fill sherry casks from Bodegas Lustai. On the nose, just a more intense sherry character. So with the Redbreast 12, you're going to get your sultanas, your dates, your raisins. It's as if you were to get all those dried fruits and put them in a pot and really melt them down. It becomes a bit more intense, a bit sweeter, a bit stickier. And again, just more of that Spanish wood character coming through. Bottled at 46% ABV as well, so this will just have a little bit more alcohol than the previous whiskey. Intensely creamy, lusciously sweet, and again, just a different element of dried fruit, more of that kind of dates, figs, and more marzipan in there as well. A little bit spicier, again, just some of that Spanish wood really coming to the front. This is whiskey I'm a big fan of, somebody who really loves sherry. And if you like that, typical sherry character from Redbreast, and you want to delve a little bit deeper, Redbreast Lustai is a really great place to start. Next up, we have Redbreast 15. This whiskey actually began its life as a special edition. We released this for a company called La Maison de Whiskey, but the feedback on it was so positive, we decided to make this a permanent expression in the family. It's important to say that this isn't just an older version of the 12-year-old or a younger version of the 21. It's actually its own whiskey in its unique right, and I think it's a bit underrated. A lot of people will have tried the 12-year-old and love it. A lot of people have tried the 21 and know how good it is, so it's very easy to overlook the 15. So for me, I'm always a bit defensive about this whiskey. I think it's really underrated. The first thing that comes across to me in the nose is much spicier than the previous two whiskies. I would describe this as the spiciest, definitely, of the Redbreast family. It has that kind of distinctive black pepper quality in the nose. It's a little bit greener. It's a little bit more herbal than the previous whiskies as well. A little bit floral too. And more of a kind of dark fruit character coming through. So on the palate, again, just that lovely, rich, spicy character. That red fruit, for me, it's maybe some like blackcurrant or raspberry. It's definitely a bit more of a brambly kind of autumnal flavor profile. Again, just loads of black pepper. Lovely kind of green herbal quality, maybe some licorice in there as well. Definitely very, very different to the 12-year-old and very different to the Lustai as well. Up next, we have the Redbreast 21-year-old. Up until quite recently, this was the oldest permanent expression in the Redbreast family and is one of my all-time favourite whiskies. Like I said, until recently, this was the oldest expression in the Redbreast family, aged for at least 21 years. And it's worth pointing out that this is at least 21 years. There's actually much older whiskey in here as well. When it gets to a whiskey of this age, particularly for Redbreast, it gets a lot more tropical. So for me, it's all about pineapple. I get loads and loads of pineapple on the nose. Some of that boiled sweets, that pear drop quality as well, which you tend to find in some of the older whiskies from Middleton. But just intensely tropical. Lovely, beautiful sweet nose. The classic kind of Christmas cake character is definitely still there. It's just a little bit more developed. It's gone in a slightly different direction. Hugely complex. This is one you could really take your time with. Just a big, big burst of beautiful tropical flavour. Again, for me, I get a lot of pineapple initially. Still that boiled sweet character, that pear drop character coming through. Some people might say apples, but for me, it's definitely like that kind of, not even an actual pear, it's definitely like a pear drop, the sweets. But lusciously sweet, intensely creamy, hugely complex. Again, this is one you really want to take your time with. So if you want to pause here, this would be a good time. Next up, we have Redbreast 27-year-old. This is the oldest permanent expression in the Redbreast family, and it's the first Redbreast to incorporate ruby port pipe maturation. It's quite new, only launched in Ireland back in March, and it's bottled at cask strength at 54.6% ABV. It comes in a lovely, beautiful presentation box as well. On the nose of this whiskey, again, you get some of those tropical notes you would find in the 21, but they've developed slightly due to the influence of the port pipes. So there's more peach, lychee, loads of dark red fruit, plums, black cherry. Hugely complex. On the palate, first of all, very, very rich, very intense. Definitely a bit of that extra alcohol, giving it some extra weight to the spirit. Lovely, lovely black cherry notes, almost like maraschino cherries coming through. Definitely that like dark red, fleshy fruit. A little bit spice as well, a little bit of like a red pepper or chili, or even like a bit of a menthol note coming through. Definitely the most complex whiskey we've tasted so far. So finally, we have Redbreast 12-year-old cask strength. The reason we're going backwards in age here is I wanted to finish up on our 2 cask strength whiskies, which are obviously a bit higher in alcohol. Every year we do a batch of Redbreast 12-year-old, which is bottled at cask strength, which is the strength it comes out of the barrel. With the 12-year-old, it's all about consistency, and every time you get it, you know you're going to get a consistent product. With the 12-year-old cask strength, we actually celebrate inconsistency. It's about those slight variations between batches. Because so many of the batches are unique, I'm not going to do a tasting of it. I really want you to taste it yourself and make up your own notes. Sadly, that brings our whiskey tasting to an end. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm a big fan of Redbreast. I'm always really happy to talk about it. And I think once you try it, you can understand why people are so in love with this whiskey. If you'd like to stay up to date with any local events or information on any of our whiskies, just follow us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at Whiskey Club NI, or visit our website, whiskeyclub.com. Thanks.